I told you a simple laundry line was more powerful than a loaded gun? In the mid-19th century, the American South was a fortress of shadows. For millions of enslaved people, the dream of freedom was just that, a dream. They were trapped in a world where reading was a crime, and writing a letter could be a death sentence. To escape, they needed a map. But how do you carry a map when you aren't even allowed to carry a piece of paper? The answer was hidden in plain sight. It was stitched into the very fabric of their lives, on windowsills, over fences, and across porch railings. To the slave masters, they were just quilts, blankets made of scrap fabric. But to a runaway, they were a GPS made of cotton. This was the quilt code of the Underground Railroad. Today, we unroll the fabric of history to reveal the secret maps that led thousands to freedom. To understand the quilts, we must first understand the Underground Railroad. It wasn't a real train, and it wasn't underground. It was a clandestine network of safe houses and conductors, brave souls like Harriet Tubman. Communication was their biggest enemy. The railroad used songs to signal directions, but for visual cues that stayed in place for days, they needed something more permanent, something invisible to the untrained eye. Enter the African American quilting tradition. The quilts were masterpieces of deception. Enslaved women would sew specific geometric patterns, each representing a unique instruction. These quilts would be hung outside safe houses to dry. A bounty hunter would ride right past them, seeing nothing but laundry. But for a fugitive hiding in the bushes, that quilt was a voice whispering in the dark. Let's decode the patterns. First, there was the monkey wrench. This was often the first quilt shown. It was a call to action. It told the enslaved, gather your tools, prepare your spirit. The journey begins soon. Next came the wagon wheel. In the dead of night, many escapes happened in the back of actual wagons with false bottoms. This quilt signaled that a wagon was ready to transport fugitives to the next station. But the most survival-critical pattern was the bear's paw. Most runaways would naturally want to follow the main roads. The bear's paw commanded them to do the opposite. It told them to follow the actual tracks of bears through the jagged mountains. Why? Because bears knew where the water was. And following their rough trails made it impossible for bloodhounds to track a human scent. Then, there was the log cabin. This is where your visual attention had to be perfect. A quilt with a yellow center square meant, this house is a safe station. But if that center was black, it was a warning. The house was under watch. Do not stop. Keep running. As they neared the north, the most sacred pattern appeared, the North Star. For those who had lost their guides, for those whose feet were bleeding and hearts were breaking, the North Star was the ultimate compass. It reminded them to look at the sky. As long as they followed that light, they were heading toward liberty. Think about the courage it took to sew these. These women were literally stitching the survival of their people into blankets. Each stitch was a risk. Each pattern was a prayer. If caught, the quilter and the escapee would face the gallows. Yet, they sewed on. The quilt code remains one of the most beautiful mysteries of American history. Some historians call it a legend. Others point to the oral histories passed down through generations. But one thing is certain. The Underground Railroad was won not just by generals, but by silent hands and invisible ink. History isn't always found in books. Sometimes it's sewn into the very fabric of our lives. If you found this story powerful, hit the like button and share it to keep the unwritten scrolls alive. Let us know in the comments which historical mysteries should we unroll next.